The Premonition. This story is about Smith's family in a small town. Smith's family was very well known for their wealth around the area. Still, after a bizarre, unbelievable event, they became destitute. The story had been spread out everywhere by the villagers. In the beginning, Smith's family was still the most famous noble clan in the area. The father was too old back then. He had been sick so bad, at his last night, he had called his only son, David, to his deathbed and told him an important thing. "Son, you gotta listen to me. You have to do those things after I die." Before he had David, he and his wife birthed another son. But the son was such an unlucky baby. He had been sick after a few days of being born and died already. The father had buried his first son at the foothill. That was in the winter. Snows had covered the ground thickly, and it was frozen to death. On his way back, the father saw a man lying on the snowy ground. He looked like he was dying because of cold or probably hungry. The father had lost his first baby, so he had become full-hearted at that moment and decided to bring the man home to save him. The man woke up in the house the following morning. He introduced that he was a shaman and wanted to pay the father back for his kindness. "Master, your family had been destined to lose all your fortune very soon, but you have saved my life. I'll try to help you to keep your fortune as long as you're alive." The father didn't understand what the shaman told him, but he still believed in his words. As the shaman instructed, the method was so scary and brutal. When the first son of the smith's father had died, within 7 days, the baby's spirit wasn't escaped his body yet. The father had to pin an iron nail to his dead son's head to keep the baby's spirit on that body forever. After then, the father had to bring the baby's body back and be buried in the middle of his main gate and prayed for his son's spirit to stay and save his fortune. After the father passed away, the shaman added that the family had to dig the baby's skeleton out, bury the baby's body along with the father at the family's cemetery to make up for his suffers after all of those years. Time flew. It was 20 years had passed by. Smith's family still kept their wealth, and at that moment, the father was on dead bed. He handed the last important thing to his son, David. He said to him over and over again, "Son, you gotta do that for me." After those last words, he had gone. His body had been kept in the house for 2 days, and the next 3 days was his funeral. The third day after he died, David remembered his father's dying wishes. He went to the main gate and tended to dig out the skeleton. There was indeed a baby skeleton under there. In the center of the skull, there was a nail as well. David looked at the skeleton, but he was confused. To be honest, David knew he wasn't good at running the business. He worried that how could he manage the whole thing after his father died. If he followed his father's dying wishes, everything would collapse in front of him. He had known how to keep his family's fortune. Why he would dig the skeleton out? He wanted to let it as was to keep the fortune forever. And so, David changed his mind. He buried the skeleton back as before. Then he stood up and backed to the funeral. After a few steps, David heard a sound of nails sounded like they were bumped into each other's. He tackled since he was wrongdoing. David gave his eyes around him. That was no one around in the middle of the night, and at the funeral, he dazed for a sec and realized that he had a buzzing in his ears. David thought that was because of exhaustion, so he headed to his room to take a rest. The following day, David woke up, but he didn't get any better. He started to get dizzy, and the buzzing looked more serious to his ears. On the third day, one of his relatives realized he got a very withering and tired face. The relative thought that was because of his father's death and soothed him. "David, don't be heavy-hearted like that. Everything is gonna be fine. All you should do now is finishing your father's funeral well, then take a good rest. You gotta take care of your family business in the future." David escorted the relative to the gate afterward before he left. After hearing those soothing words, David felt better, but suddenly, he saw a pool of blood at the main gate. Looked more carefully, the pool of blood was placed at where he had buried the skeleton back. To be more exact, he saw the ground was bleeding. He got pale and frightened. The relative saw his face change suddenly, so he asked what happened to David. "David, what happened? Are you okay?" David was able to pull himself together after a certain amount of time. He looked back to the pool of blood, but there was nothing there, all clean. In the next 2 days, David got paranoid sometimes. He saw blood everywhere. He guarded his father's coffin at night and tried to rest in the daytime. However, even he took a very good rest, he still kept paranoia. He scared everything, even himself. He was likely to be drowned in his sins. A part of him from inside told that he and his family was gonna be okay. He did the right thing to keep his family's fortune. Still, another side of him reminded those paranoias were all warns. One day, David got a weird dream. He saw he was being in a dark room. He heard some sound, sort of iron stick bumped to each other. He turned his head back in the dream. David saw his father was nailed something by an iron nail. He looked more carefully. His father was nailed a baby's skull. His father's face looked glum. Just in a few seconds, there were lots of black smoke flew out from the skull's eyes. The smoke was not quite black. There was purple and blue formed some scary faces. They flew towards David and surrounded him shortly. Those scary misshapen faces made him scared to death and crouched like a ball. The sounds were louder and louder to his ears and really dissonant. David covered his ears, but that was helpless. The sound was likely from his mind. Those black smokes came surrounded him, and he was nowhere to hide. Then he saw all black and his head got headache all of a sudden. Once he awakened, David realized that he was placed at the baby position. He was nailing to the head, and his own father brutally pinned the nail to his head. David screamed aloud badly. The next second he awakened, David's body all got sweats. He was very sure that was his unlucky older brother came to warn him in the dream. David wanted to dig out the skeleton, but there were so many people at his father's funeral. At that moment, he heard a knock door sound. David thought out carefully. He shouldn't have dug out the skeleton in front of the whole visitors, so he planned to dig out at night, then built a small graveyard secretly. He followed the plan. David buried his father as usual. His family was prestigious in the area, so lots of people came to share their condolences. Everyone would keep an eye on him, so he knew that he could not make a wrong move. Right after the ceremony, he came to the gate and brought his father's name tag along. Out of the blue, after he stepped out of the door, David saw those black smokes as in his dream. Those scary misshapen faces appeared as well in front of him. He was terrified. Short of a step at the door, he fell to the ground and got hit in the head. David got hurt, his head was bleeding, and he fainted. Everything messed up at the funeral. People tried to shook him up and called a doctor. David awakened a few moments afterward. Right after he opened his eyes, he didn't care about his status, bleeding on the head. He instantly tried to come to the gate. Then he used his bare hands, dug out at the gate in front of the whole visitors there. His reactions drove people to feel weird. Someone tried to stop him, but he ignored everyone. Even though his nails bleed because of digging too much, he continued to dig out. People gradually believed that David might get out of his mind and was doing some stupid things, but then they saw a white skeleton there. David had to dig out a white baby skeleton. David bowled in front of the skeleton and asked the butler to prepare another funeral. He wanted to bury the baby along with his father. Even though many people tried to stop him, David was very determined to bury the baby along with his father that night. Eventually, a few years later, David was unable to sustain his family business as before. Failures from time to time, then debts. Smith's family, from a wealthy business family, then became a typical farmer family. That bizarre stuff that happened at Smith's father's funeral became a source of rumors. People said that the family lost all their fortune because the ghost had cursed them, or someone told that that was because David had killed a baby and buried at the gate. However, afterward, David still kept his silence, and there was only he knew the truth.